We gaan naar het huis van de familie. Dat is daar in het rijke luiswijkje.
Ja.
Deze man gaat niet zo goed mee.
Mr. Miles Fordham is here to see you, sir.
Very good, Mr. Havelock. Send him up.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Havelock.
Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Fordham. I'm Malcolm Harris.
Ja.
I'm terribly sorry to hear about what's happened, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Fordham. You were very highly recommended by Miss Upton. She said you'd be able to solve this faster and more discreetly than the police. I admit it's a rather unorthodox approach, but we're desperate.
I understand. I'll do all I can to find the kidnapper and bring your son back unharmed.
If you'd like to examine the nursery, it's just through that door to the left.
Okay.
I'll ask you to please try and keep quiet as I just sent my wife to bed. Her nerves are rather shot, you see.
Oh shit.
Yes, of course.
Ja. Nou, laten we eens even kijken wat er allemaal aanklikbaar is hier binnen.
I know the hand and waistcoat pose are supposed to look stately, but to me it always looks like the person is scratching themselves. The Harris
Well, that-
family certainly has
Yeah.
a nice view from which to look down upon the world. I wonder if they use the balcony to give speeches to the gardeners.
Seems
It's
it.
nice to see that tea is still served here even in times of tragedy.
Heel Brits.
I wouldn't get too close, Miles. That vase is probably worth more than your entire building. She looks like she's up to something. I'm sure the only location the Harrises care about is wherever they are at any given moment. Mr. Harris said his wife went to bed.
Oh ja,
Probably
laten we
not
daar
a good
niet
idea
naar
Oh
binnen
to
ja,
gaan.
disturb.
we moeten naar de nursery.
Even kijken wat we hier kunnen vinden aan aanwijzingen. Een gat
Blijkbaar
in
zijn
het
we een
raam.
fysieke baby kwijt.
Ja?
A steam-powered bottle warmer. Certainly beats having to do it in the fireplace. Or in the case of my
Steam-powered
parents,
bottle warmer.
over a
Ja,
battle fire.
alles is steam-powered nu, hè.
Ja.
Dit is een knoop.
That's odd. Why is there a loose button in the crib? I'm no expert on children, but it seems like it would be dangerous to have around an infant. Ah,
Lijkt me
only
een
a flower
aanwijzing.
shop burglar was as easy
Yeah.
to find as this clue was. Yeah, the kidnapper left the child's blanket behind. There doesn't appear to be any trace of the silver spoon, though. Nice mobile. Custom made, too. There'll be no mistaking what family this child comes from.
Nou, lijkt het toch op dat we hier gezien hebben wat we konden
dear.
zien. Oh. Ah, de medicatie
The
werkt.
soporific has started working. Well done, Fordham.
Duurt een
Now
uur,
how
zei
are
hij.
you supposed to... What's the word I'm looking for?
Instigate, interrogate.
I just had it on the
Lekker,
tip of my
hoor.
tongue.
Perhaps it's time to call it a night.
Quiet.
Dan gaan we hier in slaap vallen.
Dat denk ik.
Shh. It's time to sleep. Quiet.
Well, Mr. Harris, I believe I've done all I can for right now.
Did you find anything?
Yes, I believe I have some leads I can pursue. But the most important thing to do in cases like this is wait to hear from the kidnappers. I'll be back tomorrow morning to
Ja, dan
continue
gaan we
my
morgen eens even verder
investigation
hier.
and ask you and your wife some questions
Ja.
once you've had time to calm down a bit. In the meantime, I suggest you stay here and get some sleep. We'll all need it.
Nou.
Daar zitten we.
En de hele stoel in slaap gevallen.
Miles, wake up. It's nearly noon.
Ah, so it is.
Why didn't you come to bed when you got home last night?
It was late. I didn't want to disturb you.
So what was so urgent about the case Upton sent you?
I'm trying to track a kidnapped child.
Ja.
Oh my goodness. That's awful.
Yes, the pressure's on, but I think I should be able to crack it.
Assuming you actually managed to get anything done at the Harris Manor today.
Well, let me know if there's anything
Precies.
I can do to help. Also, we've got company. Mrs. Delacroix is having her hair done here today, so please make yourself presentable.
You mean I'm not all ready?
At least do something about your hair. I do have a reputation to maintain after all.
Oké.
What's wrong with my hair?
Do you really want me to answer that? We'll be here all day.
Arme man. Wordt gepest als een verhaal.
It's admirable just how organized Adelaide...
Ah, niks mis met mijn haar. We gaan gewoon.
And then he said, "Oh, hello there. I don't believe we've met."
Mrs. Delacroix, this is my husband, Miles. Miles, this is Mrs. Delacroix.
Pleasure to meet you, madam.
Likewise, young man. Pleasure.
Is everything all right, Mrs. Delacroix?
Oh, yes, everything's fine.
Een rare vrouw.
It's just that... Well, you weren't what I was expecting, is all.
Keep your head, Miles. She may be a close-minded idiot, but she's just an old lady.
Ha. Ja, laten we het netjes houden.
Ja.
What were you expecting exactly?
Well...
Now then, Mrs. Delacroix, what was it that you were telling me about Mr. Delacroix and his dogs?
Oh, yes. So, Harold came in and said...
Impressive. She got off pretty easy. I was expecting a repeat of the Parsons incident. You should give Adelaide a kiss on the way out, though, just to make the old bat feel extra uncomfortable.
Lijkt me goed.
Addie?
Not right now, Miles. I'm busy. We
Oh.
can talk once I finish with Mrs. Delacroix.
Ja, dan gaan we maar terug naar het huis.
Sowieso.
Goodbye, dearest.
Oh.
I look forward to your return, my love.
Terug naar het huis.
Remind me, Miles, how was finding some rich
Oh, we
people's
gaan dat nu
kidnapped
doen in
baby
een
going to
kar.
help us track down the flower shop burglar?
Ja.
Ja, je weet het niet, hè?
Ja, weten wij niet. Nee.
Nee. About helping people. Dat vind ik wel een goeie. Nee.
It's possible we might find a lead to the burglar during the course of this investigation.
Really, Miles? You really believe that?
Anything's possible, Bill. You remember how many times we encountered seemingly trivial matters which turned out to be important later on?
Well, if you plan on solving this case, you'll need your full wits about it.
Ja.
I do have my full wits about me. I'm perfectly capable of doing this.
Yes, and I'm perfectly capable of being alive. I just choose to be this way because it saves on the laundry expenses. You can't deny it. You need to stop taking the soporific, Miles. Adelaide has been trying to get you to stop for months, and Upton already suspects something is amiss. Not to mention your little episode last night. Trust me, no one is going to want to hire the dullard
De
detective.
dollar detective.
Clever. Did you come up with that one all by yourself?
What are you going to do when the cases stop coming in? How long before you get put away in Riverview?
If I do get locked away, it'll be your fault.
Which is exactly why you need to get back to your normal routine so you can find the burglar.
Oké, we gaan sowieso stoppen met onze pillen.
Ja.
Maar we moeten wel eerlijk blijven, denk ik.
Ja.
All right, fine. I'll stop. But you know that doesn't guarantee we'll find the burglar any sooner.
Yeah, I'm aware, but it increases the odds significantly. Well, I'm glad that's settled then. I knew you'd see things my way.
Nou, dat scheelt. We gaan stoppen met
Not
de
as though you gave me
medicatie.
much of a choice.
In time, you'll thank me. Probably not before the withdrawal hits, though.
Don't make me change my mind on this, Bill.
Nou. Verder
Mr.
met ons
Fordham, you're
onderzoek.
back. Allow me to introduce my wife, Miriam.
Hello.
A pleasure, Mrs. Harris. I wish we could have met under better circumstances, but I assure you I'm doing all I can to find your son.
Thank you, Mr. Fordham.
Mr. Harris, has there been any communication from the kidnapper?
None at all.
Well, I'll have another look around, if you don't mind.
Dan gaan we eerst wel even verder in die kamer.
Ja.
Miles, didn't you notice something a bit strange about the Harrises?
Quite a few things, actually. What are you referring to?
Their son was just kidnapped, yet they're each on their own side of the sitting room.
Ah,
Not comforting each other, not crying together. Nothing.
They're stuck-up rich
wel
people.
bijzonder, ja.
Not exactly the type to
No.
show emotion.
Miles, you know I'm the most cynical person there is when it comes to their type. But this isn't normal behavior, even for snobs. This goes deeper than saving face. There's something going on between them. I
Ah,
think you should find out what. Some sort of fuzzy animal wearing a waistcoat. Charming. Bear's picnic. Something about a group of giant human-like
bear's
bears eating
picnic.
together in the woods is slightly unsettling. My friend Bunny. Yeah, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want a giant imaginary rabbit for a friend. Look at that. The kid has a toy chest. My sister and I used to have to keep our
Kunnen we
toys
die
buried
openen?
in the backyard. Of course, that is because the only toys we had were dead rats. Look at that.
Nee.
Of course, that...
Oké, de crib hadden we al bekeken. Laten we even naar de broken window kijken.
Probably won't
Er
be
zijn
another year
blokken.
or so before the child gets any practical use out of those blocks beyond putting them in his mouth. Interesting. This
Torn
fabric
fabric.
looks as though it came from a garment of some kind.
Dus niet van het
Huh.
gordijn.
There's a small emblem sewn onto the side of
Kijk.
this piece of fabric.
Hmm.
It just says SS.
Somebody's initials,
Ja, dat
maybe?
zou een naam kunnen zijn, hè?
Be careful not to cut yourself, Miles. I don't think the Harris family has ever seen blood that isn't blue.
Oké.
Look, you can see the balcony extends all the way around the side of the manor.
That would make it rather easy for someone to access this window from the outside.
Precies.
No evidence of what was used to smash the glass, though. It looks rather flimsy. Let's not try sitting on it.
Dan hebben we hier alles nu bekeken. Dan zullen we denk ik buitenom moeten.
Mogelijk.
Nice view of the garden from up here.
Dan hebben we hier in deze kamer alles nu bekeken. Kunnen we hier het balkon
The
op?
Harris family certainly... I wonder
Nee.
if they...
We kunnen wel de andere slaapkamer in. De eerste aanwijzingen zoeken en dan praten. Dat is wel een goede volgorde, hè?
Hmm.
Hier is een stofzuiger. Suction cleaner.
Fancy. Some poor servant's probably gonna get
Wel,
a
het is,
flogging
toch?
for leaving it in here, though. Who in their right mind would need that many drawers?
Goeie vraag.
Let's see what we have here. A very poorly written letter
Mr.
addressed
Harris.
to Mr. Harris.
I don't suppose it's a letter of admiration.
On the contrary, the author seems quite upset.
Weekly reminder how much I hate you. Because of you, my
Dead.
wife is dead. Ah. Arthur Devins.
Nothing else of note
Okay.
in any of the drawers.
Moeten we maar eens even die
Oh,
mannen
well,
gaan vragen
at least we
straks.
got to play a rousing game of search the rich people's dresser.
We vragen inderdaad naar die Arthur Devins. Er is ook nog een
Painting of the city.
wardrobe.
Probably the only time the Harris family sees any of the other boroughs. Wardrobes are usually always full of wonderfully dark secrets.
Even kijken er maar.
An empty suitcase. I
Empty
suppose Mr. Harris
suitcase.
must travel
Oké.
every now and then. One thing is for certain. Mr. Harris uses entirely too much starch on his shirts. Mr. Harris's color selection is almost as drab as yours.
Let's see if there's anything of interest in any of the pockets.
So, Mr. Harris is a fan of the ponies, is he? I'm
Ah.
sure that's not causing him any trouble at all.
Hij is een gokman.
Hmm.
Mr. Harris's colors. Yeah, it seems like this is where Mrs. Harris keeps her unmentionables. I like the ones with the frills and the stitched cat. Paperwork and
Okay.
receipts. Nothing particularly interesting here. More lacy underthings. No wonder which Harris they belong to.
Ze zijn allemaal lades met niks.
Ja.
It looks like a pile of women's clothes. Must belong to Mrs. Harris.
Even kijken.
There's a handwritten note among the clothes.
I have to see you tonight. It's been far too long. Air.
Hmm.
Wie is Air?
Een goede vraag.
Nothing else hidden. Oh, another four-poster. The Harris family certainly makes no secret of their wealth.
Nou, dan gaan we maar eens wat vragen stellen. Zonder ruzie te maken. Eerst de meneer.
I have some questions for you, Mr. Harris.
Yes, of course.
Tell me everything you can about the kidnapping.
I don't know much. I was out last night while it happened.
Where had you been previously?
I was out with friends. My wife can verify the time I arrived home.
Wait a minute. I know this attitude all too well. This man is hiding something. Most likely from his wife.
Ja,
I
ja.
doubt it's voices from beyond the grave, So the question is, what's his secret?
I found this letter in your bedroom. What can you tell me about it?
You went through our things?
I'm a private investigator, Mr. Harris. It's part of my job.
Of all the insolence!
You're upset, I know, but do you want me to find your son or don't you?
Yes, of course I do. That letter was sent to me by mistake. It was written to my father. Well, if you can even call that writing.
Have I ever mentioned how much I hate rich people? Because I really hate rich people.
Your father? Doesn't he own the company building the new airship?
Yes, that's right. He's been receiving many letters just like that one since the Ligeia disaster. But that Devons fellow in particular has sent one every week, along with a bag of chicken bones and dust.
How peculiar.
Chicken bones.
Not only that,
Alright.
he leads a daily protest in front of the construction yard where the HMS Lenore is being built, trying to halt production. My God! How did I not see this before?
See what?
Devons! He has a grudge against this family because of what happened with the Ligeia. I'd put money on him being involved with the kidnapping somehow, as a form of retaliation.
I'll just have to
Zit wel wat
speak
in.
with Mr. Devons and see for myself.
Nieuwe locatie, denk ik.
I found this bit of torn fabric by the broken window. Do you know anything about it?
Looks like it came from a piece of clothing. Possibly a jacket.
Did the initials SS mean anything to you?
Maybe? I can't really say. You'll have to excuse me,
verhaal.
Mr. Fordham. I've got quite a lot on my mind right now. If I can
Maar
think
hij
of
lult
anything, I'll be
sowieso.
sure to let you know.
Mr. Harris, what can you tell me about these?
What? How did you...
Listen, I'm trying to help you and your family. I can't do it if I don't get the entire truth.
Do you think we could discuss this somewhere more private?
I suppose we could.
Good. Let's move to the nursery then.
Oké.
Die vrouw zit daar gewoon chill.
Ja.
Bijzonder wel.
Shall we continue our conversation, Mr. Harris?
Yes, of course.
Ik kan nu niet meer die vraag stellen over die stub.
Nee.
Now that your wife is out of earshot, tell me about the kidnapping. And
Ah.
what these
Oh, yeah.
betting stubs have to do with it.
Right. As I said before, it had already happened when I got home. I had just come from spending the evening at the meadows.
I see.
Denk ik
I
ook
take
een
it
nieuwe
your wife isn't
locatie.
impressed by your hobby?
I promised her weeks ago that I would stop going, but I've had such a good streak lately. The last thing I wanted was to upset her further, yet it would be foolish of me to just give up on something so promising.
Can you think of anyone who might want to do you harm by taking your son?
Several, I'm afraid.
Go on.
I haven't exactly had the best of luck, Mr. Fordham. That's why this latest streak was so important to me. The truth is, I've gambled away most of my money. I've had to take out several loans so Miriam doesn't get suspicious. If she ever found
Hij heeft
out,
geen geld
it
meer.
would be over. I can't lose him, Mr. Fordham. I just
Hij is
can't.
helemaal niet een
Where have
rijke
I
man.
heard this before? You know, things would be so much easier if people just talked to each other.
I've tried doing business above board, but lately I've had to seek other resources.
What do you mean?
Nope.
I was forced to visit a lending office. The owner was a rather shady Sambo, but I figured he'd be easier to deal with than the usual sheenies that run those type of places.
Can you believe this guy? Maybe we should just leave the kid be. He'd probably be better raised by wolves.
Who was the owner?
Mr. LeFay. I didn't bother to get his first name. His business is an abattoir row in Chumley. Horrid place.
Nieuwe locatie.
I was desperate.
Ja.
You think this Mr. LeFay may have taken your son as collateral?
Let's just say there isn't much those type of people wouldn't do to put a crown in their pocket.
Tell me about your son.
Charles is a good boy. Very quiet. Miriam had wanted a child almost from the moment we married. You know how women are when they have their hearts set on something. I saw no need to rush, but
Nice to know you're not the only one. Hey, Miles.
the first 2 times Miriam was with child, she suffered some unfortunate accidents. She was devastated, as you can imagine. So when Charles finally came along, he turned out to be quite a blessing. I can't imagine what sort of depraved madman would take him from us like this. You must find him, Mr. Fordham.
I intend to, Mr. Harris.
Ja.
Tell me about yourself.
There isn't much to tell, really. My life has been fairly well publicized in the newspapers.
Let's pretend for a moment that I skip over the society pages.
Well, I'm an investor. My father Clyde runs Harris Construction Company, which I will someday inherit. Any other details about me are fairly trivial nonsense, I think.
found this button in your son's crib. Does it look familiar at all?
No, not at all. Do you think the kidnapper might have left it behind?
It's a distinct possibility. How goes the construction of the new airship?
There have been some complications, but nothing we can't handle.
Could you be a bit more specific?
Well, I already told you about the trouble with protesters at the yard,
Yeah,
and we're blocked
protesters.
pending Royal Maverick's review of the safety regulations for the prototype etheric diffusion engines. Agitators and red tape aside, we should still be on schedule to have the Lenore finished and in the air by the end of the year. But really, Mr. Fordham, what the deuce does this have to do with finding Charles?
He has a point, you know.
Those are all the questions I had for now.
All right.
Nou, dan gaan we zijn vrouw eens even
If you
ondervragen.
don't mind, Mr. Fordham, I'm going back to the living room. I don't want Miriam getting suspicious.
Miriam.
I have some questions for you if you're up to answering them, Mrs. Harris.
I'll try my best, Mr. Fordham.
Goed haar.
Tell me what you know
Yeah.
about your son's kidnapping.
Oh, my poor baby. Oh.
Mrs. Harris, I know this is difficult, but I need as much information as you can give me so I can bring your son back.
Yes, you're right. I have to stay strong. For Charles, it happened sometime between 6 and 8 last night. I think both my husband and I had gone out. Charles was in the care of his nanny, Mrs. Davis. I arrived home first, around 8:30, and that's when I found the scene in the nursery,
The
as
scene.
it was.
And what was it you found?
Mrs. Davis, unconscious in her chair, the broken window,
Wie is Mrs.
and
Davis?
Charles missing from
Goeie
his
vraag.
crib. Malcolm arrived home shortly afterwards, around 9, and then immediately sent our butler, Mr. Havelock, to notify the police. We stayed up waiting for any contact from the kidnappers.
Die butler hadden we al wel gezien.
Your husband mentioned he was out with friends last night. Where were you?
Oh, I was visiting with some of my friends. We gathered at one of their homes for a concert.
It seems hiding something from your spouse is an activity both Harrises partake in.
Mrs. Davis, wie is
What
dat?
can you tell me about Mrs. Davis?
Well, she's worked for us since Charles was born, a little over 6 months ago.
How did you come to employ her?
Malcolm's mother had a friend whose daughter she used to care for. She came highly recommended. We've never had any problems with her. She's always been a dream.
Where is she now?
In her room, I would guess. With Charles missing, there's little for her to do.
Where might I find her room?
There's a small building just around the back of the manor. Hers is the 4th door from the left.
Kijk, een nieuwe kamer.
Can you think of any reason why your son would be a target for kidnapping?
It could be that someone wants our money, or some lunatic who's angry about the new airship. My husband's an investor, and my father-in-law owns the company building it, you see. I just don't know, Mr. Fordham. Frankly, the fact that something like this could even happen is just terrifying.
I found this bit of torn fabric by the broken window. Do you know anything about it?
No, I've never seen it before. Do you think it was left by the kidnapper?
Perhaps. Did the initials SS mean anything to you?
No, I can't think of anyone or anything I know with those
SS.
initials.
Tell me about your son.
Charles is
Ze kennen
our only
allebei geen
child.
SS, zeggen
Such a
ze.
good boy.
Mhm.
Never makes a fuss.
Nou ja,
Always very sweet.
zo duidelijk zei hij dat niet, hè?
Charles,
Nee, dat is
you
waar.
must be so
Hij zei
frightened
mogelijk.
about
Ja,
her.
precies. Ja.
Oh, please, Mr. Fordham. You have to bring him home.
I'll do my best. Tell me a bit about yourself, Mrs. Harris.
Mr. Fordham, my son has been kidnapped and is out there alone, terrified and confused. What could I possibly tell you that would make any difference to you finding him?
I suppose you're right, Mrs. Harris. My apologies if I upset you. I found this note in your bedroom. What can you tell me about it?
I've never seen that note before in my life.
Are you absolutely sure?
Mr. Fordham, you mentioned you valued discretion.
Hmm.
I ask you to please exercise some now.
Would it be possible to speak about this in private? In another room, perhaps?
Out of the question, Mr. Fordham. I shall not leave this sitting room
Ah.
in the company of another man. If
Misschien
my
hadden we
husband
deze
is
vraag
not
moeten
present.
stellen toen hij net
Yes,
in de
I
nursery
understand.
was.
Let's put the subject on hold for now.
What a life these rich people lead.
Yeah.
All the money in the world and they're trapped like rats.
I found this button in your son's crib. Does it look familiar at all?
No, I don't recognize it. It looks like it came from some cheap coat. Is that what the ruffian who took my baby was wearing?
That's what I'm trying to determine. That's all for now, Mrs. Harris.
Very well.
Nou, dan hebben we denk ik alle vragen gesteld die we konden stellen.
Nou, denk ik.
En dan moeten we maar naar de volgende locatie. Dat gaan we dan
Dat lijkt-
doen in de volgende video.
Goed, yes.
Tot dan. Joejoe.